I love the book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. And I have a little bit from there to share with you this morning. And then I had actually written a commentary on this verse at an earlier time. Sometimes I don't date these things. So I'm going to read both of those things for you. This is in Isaiah chapter 51, verses 10 through 13. He hath made the depths of the sea a way for the ransomed to pass over. I am he. Do not forget God by fearing the fury of the oppressor, because God hath stretched forth the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth. And where is the fury of the oppressor? So this passage begins with a reference to the children of Israel following Moses through the Red Sea as they escaped from Pharaoh's hosts. And this is, Isaiah was using this as a reference for all of us, that we all have our Red Sea to pass through. But the very trial we have is our way of escape, or can be our way of escape. And also there is no reason to fear the oppressor, because he or she is a person like you and me. They aren't God. And God made us all. So it is good to stand up to oppression and live. God delivers. That's what I had written back then. And so I want to add a little more, of course. I want to talk about how the easiest way to see this principle in action is, for example, for those of us who have struggled with addictions. And so we're the ransomed. This is the ransomed. And all of us are the ransomed in some way. But the Red Sea that we have to pass through is the work that we would do to release ourselves from that addiction. And we might need help as well, right? And it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to go through withdrawal. It's not pleasant to feel the emotions we were numbing. It's not pleasant to retrain ourselves to new ways of thinking, feeling, and living that are completely new territory, so on and so forth, okay? And in fact, it's not pleasant to maybe have to have conversations with people we've hurt. Maybe we have to deal with law enforcement, all that kind of thing. And yet we know that that's the way out. It's not there just to make life even more miserable for us. It's the way out. It's the cleansing of the trap that we found ourselves in. We're trapped and miserable in our addictions, but we have to pass through a certain kind of descent that may not be pleasant, and yet it's the cleansing. It's the way out. When we take medicine, it doesn't always taste good. When we go through operations, there's not always a recovery. So I'm using addiction as a very extreme example to show that the way out is sometimes more work, more things that feel like pain, but we have to come to the point where it's less pain than it was to stay where we're at. And it can be anything. It doesn't have to be a particular vice or an addiction. For example, for me, in my life, I've struggled a lot with like poverty and things like that, and poverty mentality and making new choices. And you could say that it's not really my fault. I found myself in these circumstances, but maybe it is. Maybe it is and maybe it isn't. But it's always going to be my responsibility to get my way out. And my way out is, again, by my choices. And it's by going through the sea. It's by having enough guts to start a business, or having enough guts to try for a job that's above my level, or even one that's at my level, but revamping my resume, or and I'm just throwing different ideas out there. It just means that when you're contemplating making a change from whatever place you're in that you don't want to be in anymore, going through the passageway of the sea is not always pleasant, but it's the way out. It's your blessing. And so thinking about that in terms of world peace, I'm going to tell you, we've got a lot of that ahead of us. I mean, we're still in war, and many people are already laying hold on peace, but for those of us who haven't yet, we've got a huge sea to pass through. And it will involve standing up to people. It will, and in this case, and Isaiah ties this into the oppressors. The sea of, and which is good, because in Moses, as the template, the story of Moses and the children of Israel, the template is their actions in relation to Pharaoh, which of course is a template for all oppressions. And you have to get through this sea and to change what, if we're in oppression and we're in war, we have to go through some kind of cleansing process individually and together to get out of it. But it is the way out. So don't be afraid of that process. I read, I always forget his name, and if I find it and remember it, I'll put it in the description. But there's a gentleman who had been a neo-Nazi skinhead, or whatever he called his group, but it's something along those lines, for many, many years. And he began to change when he had his daughter, and he realized that he did want a different kind of world for his daughter. And so he changed into someone who had a different viewpoint of all human beings on earth, and he actually started touring and giving talks with another gentleman who was, I think, a Hispanic gentleman. Anyway, he completely changed his point of view from hating certain groups of people to loving them, but the change was in himself, and he had to face himself, who he was, and what he had done, and who he had hurt. And I can't imagine that was a very pleasant process at all. But it's not something that could be avoided. So you see where I'm getting with all of these examples. And when I say that there's no them and us, this is kind of what I'm saying. The oppressors are not them. They're not gods. They're not overlords. They're just people. They were born. They're going to die. They fart. They probably like Christmas presents. And yes, they're caught in things too. And I'm not saying we have to, you don't have to like everybody. But the solution is in understanding us as all as humans, and not taking the fury of the oppressor as a stopping point, but like, bring it on, but I'm still going through the sea. I'm still going to be creating this peace. I'm still going to, because God, and my definition of God is not necessarily some being in the sky, but God is that sacredness and that peace and that love and that strength and that courage, and that even when people are suffering, God is almost everything, if maybe even everything. Because even the oppressors, all the people that hurt us are our teachers. They're, in a cosmic sense, they're teaching us, okay, this is oppression. This is the question. The question is oppression. The question is war. The question is whatever else. And what's our answer? What's our answer to oppression? Is it to bow down? What's our answer to war? Is it to participate because we think that we have nothing to say to the warmongers and the oppressors? I think that you'd be surprised at what they might be able to hear, quote unquote, if we ever said anything, quote unquote, using both hearing and saying as metaphors, not just talking in ears, but the whole actions we do in the world. I hope I'm making sense. I know I do a lot of stream of consciousness stuff, but don't fear that, because there is God. And we just tap into that. And if you don't want to call it God, you don't have to, but there is that sacredness and power of goodness and courage and love in life. And that is what is creating the earth. That is what is creating the heavens. So who are the oppressors? They're nobody. They're just like you and me. And the last image that I'd love to share with you about this is not so much from Isaiah, but in thinking about the Exodus story. The whole template is just a template, is one of the best templates for human freedom at the collective level and the individual level. And you need to notice that the children of Israel and Pharaoh's troops both went through the sea. The children of Israel went first, and then later the Pharaoh's troops came. So they both went through the sea. But Pharaoh's troops drowned in the sea. And the children of Israel were able to pass through the sea. And so again, the sea is a metaphor for life in general, and then maybe some particular things that relate to each of our individual lives. But how do you do it? How do you pass through that sea without drowning? How do you pass through? Well, for one thing, you don't turn to oppression. You don't, either in your personal life, you don't turn to anything that can be represented by Pharaoh and his troops. Those hardnesses of hearts. But, and I'm going to stop, but I could talk about maybe what does the staff represent? But they pass through on dry ground. So what is your dry ground? It doesn't mean that you're not going to be passing through the sea. You are. They didn't go around the sea. They didn't fly over the sea. They didn't oh, never mind, let's go back the other way from the sea. They went through the sea. So you are going to need to go through the sea on your personal things, and we're going to need to go through the sea on our world peace things together. But what is it that's going to help us create the dry ground so that we can go through without drowning? And I'm not saying I know the answer. And that would take too long to talk about every single thing. But any situation we're in, we can ask what the answer of that dry ground is. All right? I love Isaiah, and I love the Exodus story. You'll probably hear me talk about them again. Thank you. See ya.